The German Chancellor touches down, we have Paul Fletcher, Shadow Minister for Arts, Science and also Digital Economy. He's a member from Bradfield, joining us from Australia. Paul, good early morning to you from here in India. I know it's past midday in Australia. Thank you very, very much. Let's start with a subject very close to you. You've written very strongly about it, about a robust digital infrastructure and a vibrant digital economy. And some lessons that Australia can learn and perhaps partner with India on that front.
I think the G20 is enormously important when it comes to digital infrastructure, and India has so much, I think, to share with all of the other countries that will be present. I've had the chance to go to India twice this year, particularly learning more about Aadhaar, the National Digital Identity System. In India, I think over 1.3 billion people have an Aadhaar, and the impact that that's had in allowing hundreds of millions of people who previously didn't have a bank account to get one, the way that it's created efficiencies across the whole Indian economy. I think that's something that many countries around the world can learn from. Underlying that, of course, is the physical digital infrastructure, telecommunications networks, mobile networks. Of course, the Indian mobile operators are some of the biggest in the world. And again, there's an enormous amount to learn. And then the role of the mobile device in giving connectivity into the digital world and the digital economy for people who even only a few years ago may have been very disconnected. I think India has so much to teach the world.
Yes.
But I think all the countries present will be sharing experiences. Certainly from the Australian perspective, we have a lot of focus on the question of remote area communications, and I think that's something that is of great interest around the world, particularly in providing for greater equality and allowing as many people as possible to be connected.
Well, the World Bank has been quite effusive in its praise for what India has achieved in the last 6 years, which many estimated would take us at least half a century in terms of empowering people on the digital platform and setting up a robust digital infrastructure. But how much would robust digital economies internally also help nations trade with each other directly? Do you believe it's a big step towards dependence on an international currency, or de-dollarization, as many are calling it?
Certainly trade relations are enormously important. The G20 is a vital forum for encouraging trade. Now, part of that is, how do you facilitate cross-border flows of money? How do you make it easier to transact? And some of the innovations and developments we're seeing in currency around the world clearly have a role to play there, including the role of digital currency. In Australia, we've just had a trial of central bank digital currency. But again, India is really leading the way on that front. And one of the benefits that digital currency can bring, of course, is that a country which has digital currencies operating, which has them well accepted as a means of payment, is not just people physically within that country who might then want to use those means of payment. You can be having a global influence. So these, I think, are some of the ways that the internet is really transforming the way that the governments of individual countries think about economic policy issues. If you're a country that is known to have a strong rule of law, trusted institutions, independent judiciary and so on, then that can be a factor in attracting inbound investment and financial sector activity. So I think all of these are questions, policy questions, that arise as we think about the world of trade in the 21st century.
Point well made, Paul. But along with the JAM portal, that is Jan Dhan account, bank accounts for a lot of people, crores of people, Aadhaar and also mobile connectivity, India also has the Unified Payment Interface, UPI, that's intrigued a lot of nations across the world. Singapore is already wanting to partner closely. Does that pique your interest?
Well, certainly the way that India has brought these various elements together, digital identity, a very widespread take-up of mobile devices, and then a smooth, efficient way to transfer value, essentially from mobile handset to mobile handset. And the example that keeps getting given in
Yes.
India, and I saw it for myself, was all the roadside food vendors.
Yeah.
Even a few years ago, the idea of payment and receipt in anything other than cash would have been unthinkable. But of course, now every vendor has a handset, has a mobile device, and is accepting payments, as I'm told, for as little as 1 rupee for buying a banana or something. So I think there's a lot that the rest of the world can learn there, because that's a very efficient way to move money around, very low transactions costs, and in turn making it easier to start up businesses, including micro businesses, because rather than being exposed because you haven't received payment, the payment is instantaneous. So within India, there are big benefits, and certainly anecdotally, I've very much heard about communities in the Indian diaspora, be it, say, Indian students in Australia, looking at using those tools to transact, at least between themselves, when they're outside of India physically. So I think what this reminds us is that the traditional physical borders and boundaries, which have been a feature of economic policy for centuries, in many ways, that's the old world now, and an efficient payment system operating in one country, there's very little to stop that being taken up to a significant extent in other countries.
You're also the Shadow Minister for Art and Science, Paul, so let me ask you your take on Chandrayaan, the moon landing, successful moon landing in just the second attempt. How does that change things?
Well, clearly, collaboration when it comes to space is something that's of great interest to every nation, and it's very much in the interest of everybody in the whole world that there is collaboration as we engage in space. Now, India, of course, just had a very significant, frankly, a triumph in demonstrating its capacity as a nation, its science and technology, and going to the moon. Now, that's very, very exciting. Certainly in Australia, we've got a strong interest in space, and as a nation, we've got a large landmass, we've got a distinctive position in the world, we've got a lot of desert that can be used to launch rockets and space vehicles. But we're very interested in collaboration with India on this front and so many others. The complementarity of interests between India and Australia are very significant. And although Prime Minister Albanese, our Prime Minister, is from a different party to mine, I can say there is strong bipartisan support in Australia for continuing to build on the increasingly strong relationships between India and Australia. And of course, that is underpinned by the very strong people-to-people ties. You know, in my own electorate, I've got a very significant population of Australians of Indian background, many of whom, of course, retain strong family, business and other ties to India. And that's a big advantage for our nation as we want to engage more closely with India. And of course, it's one of the huge strengths that India has. Not only is it 1.4 billion people, not only is it a very young population, but it's a country that has significant populations of people who are with Indian ancestry in so many countries around the world. So I think this G20 reminds us that, you know, India is a country on the rise, and that's something very much to be welcomed.
My final question to you is largely many nations say economics and geopolitics should be kept separate, but how much will the shadow of conflict weigh in on consensus in this time around, Paul? This is my final question to you.
I think what I'd say about that is that it's a demonstration of the leadership role that India plays for nations that are not yet at the table. India, of course, by virtue of its sheer size, is a very substantial player in world affairs. But also the extraordinary growth of the technology sector in India, as I've seen on recent visits, the extraordinary depth of scientific and technological expertise and capability in India. When you combine, on the one hand, the extraordinary strengths India has, but then also some of the continuing challenges that India has, and so therefore perhaps a greater awareness of or sensitivity to the challenges faced by other countries in less developed parts of Asia or Africa, I think India plays a vital role in being a voice and an advocate for many of those nations. So I think it's entirely unsurprising to see India leading this push. And again, it seems to me an entirely appropriate use of the position that India has with the G20 this year.
Paul Fletcher, thank you very much for your time. Let's hope that consensus prevails over a sense of conflict and divide on this platform where the theme itself is one earth, one family, one future, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We're going to